Jake Martinez walked across the campus of Riverside University with his heavy backpack bouncing against his back. The fall air was cool and crisp, and students were hurrying to their classes. Jake was different from most of the other students, though he tried his best not to show it. While other students complained about carrying heavy books or walking upstairs, Jake never seemed tired or out of breath. The university had changed a lot in the past year. Earth had joined something called the Galactic Education Exchange Program. This meant that alien students from different planets could come to study at human universities. At the same time, human students could go study on alien worlds. Jake thought it was amazing, but he also knew it made things complicated. Jake's dorm building was one of 3 chosen to house alien students. When he first heard about this, he felt excited. He had always been curious about life beyond Earth. His parents had warned him to be careful and not to stand out too much, but Jake did not understand why they seemed so worried. His room was on the 4th floor of Morrison Hall. Jake took the stairs 2 at a time, something he had always done. Without thinking about it, other students usually took the elevator or walked slowly up the stairs, breathing hard by the time they reached the top. Jake never understood why stairs were so difficult for everyone else. When Jake reached his floor, he saw his friend Alex Thompson coming out of his room. Alex was a good guy, but he always seemed tired. Right now, Alex was carrying just 2 textbooks, and he already looked like he needed a break. "Hey, Jake," Alex said, breathing a little hard. "How do you always beat the elevator? I swear you run, up those stairs." Jake shrugged. "I just walk fast, I guess." Alex shook his head. "Man, I wish I had your energy. These alien classes are killing me. My roommate makes me feel like I'm the dumbest person alive." This was a common complaint among the human students. The aliens were incredibly smart. They seemed to understand complex math and science concepts that made human students struggle. Jake did well in his classes, but he had to work for his grades. The aliens seemed to learn everything without even trying. "Which species is your roommate?" "Again?" Jake asked. "Therian," Alex replied. "Those tall gray ones with the big heads. Kevith is nice enough, but when he does homework, it takes him like 10 minutes to solve problems that take me 3 hours. It's depressing." Jake nodded. He understood the feeling, though his own situation was a bit different. His roommate was a Velkari named HFY. The Velkari were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most advanced species. They had technology that made human science look like children playing with toys. Jake walked down the hall to room 417 and used his key card to open the door. The room was divided into 2 sides like most dorm rooms. Jake's side looked like a typical college student's space. He had a bed, a desk, some clothes scattered around, and posters of movies and sports teams on the walls. HFY's side of the room looked very different. Everything was perfectly organized. The Velkari had brought some of his own technology, including a small device that projected 3-dimensional images in the air. Right now, it was showing what looked like a complex star map with moving dots and lines. HFY was not in the room, which was normal for this time of day. The alien student spent most of his time in the library or in advanced science labs. Jake had often wondered what HFY thought of him. The Velkari was always polite, but he seemed to view Jake the way a college student might view a child. It was not mean, but it was clear that HFY thought humans were not very smart or capable. Jake dropped his backpack on his bed and looked at the time. It was almost 6 o'clock, which meant HFY would be in the library for at least 2 more hours. This gave Jake time for his evening routine, something he had been doing since he was 12 years old. He went to his closet and moved some clothes aside. Behind them was a set of weights and exercise equipment that most people would find surprising. The weights were much heavier than what most college students would use. Jake had been careful to bring equipment that looked normal but was actually much more challenging than it appeared. Jake changed into workout clothes and began his routine. He started with push-ups, but not the kind that most people did. Jake could do push-ups with one hand or with his feet elevated high above his head. He could do them slowly or quickly, and he never seemed to get tired. After push-ups, Jake moved to pull-ups. He had installed a pull-up bar in the doorframe of his closet. The bar looked normal, but Jake had reinforced it to handle much more weight than a typical pull-up bar. He could do pull-ups with extra weight attached to his body, or he could do them with just one arm. The most impressive part of Jake's routine was his weightlifting. He had brought weights that looked like normal dumbbells and barbells, but they were much heavier than they appeared. Jake could lift weights that should have been impossible for a human his size. He was not a huge person. He was about 6 feet, tall with an athletic build, but he was not bulky like a bodybuilder. As Jake worked out, he thought about his family. His parents had taught him these exercises when he was young. They had told him that his abilities were special, and that he needed to keep them secret. Jake's grandfather had been the same way, and his great-grandfather before that. It was a family tradition that went back many generations. Jake's family had explained that not all humans were like him. Only certain families had these abilities. They called it the old ways. Jake's parents had told him that there were other families like theirs, but they were scattered around the world and they all kept their abilities hidden. When the aliens had first made contact with Earth, Jake's parents had become even more serious about keeping secrets. They had told Jake that it was important for the galaxy to think that humans were weak and not very impressive. If the aliens knew the truth about what some humans could do, it might cause problems. Jake finished his workout and put his equipment away. He took a shower and got dressed in normal clothes. By the time he was done, he looked like any other college student. No one would guess that he had just completed a workout routine that would have amazed Olympic athletes. Jake sat at his desk and opened his textbook for his physics class. Even though the alien students made the human students feel stupid, Jake actually did well in his classes. He had to work harder than the aliens, but his grades were good. He wondered sometimes if his physical ability somehow helped his brain work better too. As Jake studied, he thought about HFY. The Velkari student was not unfriendly, but he clearly thought humans were a weak species. Jake had heard HFY talking to other alien students about how fragile and limited humans seemed. It was not meant to be insulting, but it was clear that the aliens saw humans as physically weak and not very impressive. Jake wondered what would happen if HFY ever found out the truth. What would the alien think if he knew that his weak human roommate could lift weights that would crush most beings in the galaxy? What would happen if the other aliens found out that humans had been hiding their true abilities? These thoughts worried Jake, but he pushed them aside. His parents had taught him to be careful, and he would continue to keep his secret. As far as HFY and the other aliens knew, Jake Martinez was just another ordinary human student trying to keep up, in a galaxy full of superior beings. Little did Jake know that his secret would not stay hidden much longer. Jake Martinez finished his last class of the day feeling good about himself. Professor Williams had given a pop quiz in advanced physics, and Jake was confident he had done well. Most of the human students had looked worried when they saw the questions, but Jake had found them challenging in a fun way rather than impossible. As he walked across campus toward his dorm, Jake noticed his friend Alex sitting on a bench outside the library. Alex looked frustrated and was staring at his textbook like it had personally insulted him. "Rough day?" Jake asked, walking over to his friend. Alex looked up and sighed. "I don't know why I'm even trying anymore. My Therian roommate just explained quantum mechanics to me like I was 5 years old. He wasn't being mean about it, but I could tell he thinks I'm incredibly stupid." Jake sat down next to Alex on the bench. "You're not stupid. These aliens have been studying this stuff for hundreds of years. They have technology we can't even imagine. Of course they're going to be better at it." "I guess," Alex said, but he still looked defeated. "Sometimes I wonder what they really think of us. Do they see us as equals, or are we just like pets to them?" This question bothered Jake more than he wanted to admit. He had heard alien students talking among themselves, and while they were never cruel, it was clear they thought humans were a weak and limited species. The aliens seemed to think of humans the way humans might think of clever children or maybe smart animals. "I should get going," Jake said, standing up. "I have some studying to do." Alex nodded and went back to staring at his textbook. Jake felt bad for his friend, but there was nothing he could say that would help. The truth was that humans did seem weak compared to the aliens, at least based on what the aliens had seen so far. Jake walked back to Morrison Hall and took the stairs to the 4th floor. He was looking forward to his evening workout routine. Physical exercise always helped him think clearly, and lately he had been thinking a lot about his situation. When Jake reached his room, he expected to find it empty as usual. HFY typically stayed in the library until at least 8 o'clock, sometimes later. Jake used his keycard and opened the door, already planning his workout in his head. The room was quiet and seemed empty. Jake dropped his backpack on his bed and looked around. HFY's side of the room was as neat and organized as always. The holographic star map was still rotating slowly above the alien's desk, showing the positions of various planets and space stations. Jake went to his closet and moved his clothes aside to get to his exercise equipment. He had been extra careful lately to make sure everything was hidden properly. The last thing he needed was for someone to accidentally discover his secret. He changed into his workout clothes and began his routine. Jake started with warm-up exercises. That would have been a complete workout for most humans. He did jumping jacks, lunges, and stretches that required incredible flexibility. His movements were smooth and controlled, showing the years of training he had received from his family. After warming up, Jake moved on to push-ups. He began with regular push-ups, but these were just to get started. Soon he was doing push-ups with one hand, then with his feet elevated on his bed. He could do dozens of these without breathing hard or showing any signs of fatigue. Next came pull-ups on the reinforced bar he had installed in his closet doorway. Jake could do pull-ups that would have impressed professional athletes. He could do them slowly, holding his body weight in impossible positions, or he could do them quickly in rapid succession. The bar held his weight easily, even when he added extra resistance by holding weights in his free hand. The most impressive part of Jake's routine was always the weightlifting. He had brought equipment that looked normal, but was actually much heavier than it appeared. Jake lifted weights that should have required mechanical assistance for a human to move. He did it quietly and smoothly, as if the massive weight was no more difficult than lifting a book. Jake was in the middle of deadlifting, an amount of weight that would have crushed most beings in the galaxy, when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the electronic beep of his room's door lock disengaging. For a moment, Jake froze with the heavy barbell still in his hands. He was facing away from the door, concentrating on his form and breathing. He had been so focused on his exercise that he had not heard anyone approaching in the hallway. Jake heard footsteps entering the room, then suddenly they stopped. There was complete silence for several seconds. Then Jake heard a sharp intake of breath, the kind of sound someone makes when they see something completely unexpected and shocking. Slowly, Jake turned around while still holding the heavy weight. Standing in the doorway was HFY, his tall, blue form completely motionless. The Velkari's large eyes were wider than Jake had ever seen them. HFY's normally pale blue skin had turned almost white, and he was staring at Jake with an expression of complete disbelief. In HFY's 3-fingered hands was a data pad that was now shaking visibly. The alien's mouth was slightly open, and he seemed to be having trouble breathing normally. "Jake?" HFY's voice came out as barely a whisper. His usual confident and intelligent tone was completely gone. "What? How are you?" Jake carefully set down the weights, trying to act as normally as possible. He had spent years learning to hide his abilities, and acting casual had become second nature to him. But looking at HFY's shocked expression, Jake realized that there was no point in pretending that nothing unusual had happened. "Oh, hey, Zeph," Jake said, reaching for his towel. "You're back early tonight." But HFY was not buying the casual act. The alien took a step backward, his analytical mind clearly racing. Jake could almost see the thoughts spinning in HFY's head as the alien tried to process what he had just witnessed. "That weight," HFY said, his voice still shaky. "The gravitational force required to lift that mass. Jake, that should be impossible for your species." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead with his towel, buying time while he figured out what to say. He had always known this moment might come, but he had hoped it would not happen so soon. His family had warned him to be careful, but Jake had thought he was being careful enough. What do you mean impossible? Jake asked, trying to sound confused. HFY pointed at the weights with one shaking finger. Those weights, I can analyze. Their mass using my scanner. What you just lifted weighs approximately 450 kilograms. According to all Galactic Council data, the maximum lifting capacity for a human male of your size is approximately 100 kilograms, under ideal conditions. Jake looked at the weights, then back at HFY. The alien was clearly in shock, but his scientific mind was still working. Jake knew that lying would be pointless now. HFY had seen too much, and the alien was too intelligent to be fooled by a simple explanation. How long have you been standing there? Jake asked. Long enough, HFY replied. Jake, I saw you lift that weight like it was made of air. I watched you do exercises that should have torn your muscles apart. What I just witnessed contradicts everything we know about human physiology. Jake sat down on his bed, still holding his towel. He looked at his alien roommate, who was still standing near the door as if he was ready to run away. Jake had to make a decision. He could try to convince HFY to keep quiet, or he could tell the truth and hope for the best. Sit down, Zeph, Jake said finally. I guess it's time I told you something about humans that your species doesn't know. HFY remained standing, but his scientific curiosity was clearly fighting with his shock. Your species' physical capabilities are well documented in our databases. Humans are classified as Category 3 strength, barely above the galactic average, for intelligent species. What I just witnessed should not be possible. Jake looked out the window at the campus below. Students were walking between buildings, humans and aliens studying together in what seemed like harmony. But Jake knew that this harmony was built on incomplete information. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of, but they were wrong. That's because the information in your databases is not complete, Jake said quietly. We've been very careful about what we show the galactic community. HFY's large eyes grew even wider if that was possible. Are you saying that your species has been deliberately hiding your true capabilities? Jake nodded slowly. Some of us, yes. The room fell silent again as HFY processed this information. Jake could see his roommate's mind working, trying to understand the implications of what he had just learned. The alien's scientific training was telling him that what he had seen was impossible, but the evidence was right in front of him. Finally, HFY walked slowly to his desk and sat down heavily in his chair. He set his datapad down with shaking hands and stared at Jake for a long moment. This changes everything, the alien whispered. Jake looked at HFY sitting at his desk with his hands still shaking. The alien's pale blue skin had started to return to its normal color, but his large eyes were still wide with shock. Jake knew there was no going back now. His secret was out, and he had to decide how much to tell his roommate. I know this is confusing, Jake said, putting on a clean shirt. But I need you to understand something important. What you just saw has to stay between us. HFY stared at him for a long moment. Jake, do you realize what this means? If humans can do what I just witnessed, then everything we know about your species is wrong. The Galactic Council's entire understanding of Earth's capabilities is based on false information. Jake sat down on his bed and faced his alien roommate. That's exactly why it has to stay secret, at least for now. But why? HFY asked, his scientific mind struggling with the idea of hiding such important information. Why would your species deliberately appear weaker than you actually are? Jake took a deep breath. He had never explained this to anyone outside his family before, because we learned early that the galaxy doesn't react well to species that seem too strong or too dangerous. HFY tilted his head. A gesture Jake had learned meant the alien was thinking hard about something. What do you mean by that? Think about your own people's history, Zeph. What happens to civilizations that other species see as threats? The question made HFY uncomfortable. Jake could see the alien's expression change as he considered the implications. The Velkari, like most advanced species in the galaxy, had been involved in wars and conflicts with species that were deemed too aggressive or dangerous. You're talking about containment protocols, HFY said quietly. Jake nodded. When humans first made contact with the galactic community, we did our research. We studied the history of other species that had joined the Galactic Council. We noticed a pattern. Species that showed too much military strength or physical capability often faced restrictions. Some were limited in where they could travel or what technology they could access. Others faced worse consequences. HFY was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Jake watched his roommate's face as the alien considered what he had learned. Finally, HFY spoke again. So, your species made a collective decision to hide your true abilities? Not all humans have abilities like mine, Jake explained. But more of us do than your people think. My family calls it the old ways. We've maintained training and physical development that goes back thousands of years. There are other families, like mine, scattered around the world. Jake stood up and walked to his window. Outside, he could see human and alien students walking together across the campus. They looked peaceful and friendly, but Jake knew that this harmony was built on careful deception. When the aliens first arrived on Earth, Jake continued, the human governments had to make a choice. Show our true capabilities and risk being seen as a threat, or hide our strength and be accepted as a harmless species. And you chose to appear harmless, HFY said. We chose to appear average, Jake corrected. Not completely weak, but not impressive either. Just another species trying to find its place in the galaxy. HFY picked up his datapad and began typing on it. Jake felt a moment of panic, wondering if his roommate was reporting what he had seen to the Velkari authorities. What are you doing? Jake asked. I'm running calculations, HFY replied. Based on what I observed, I'm trying to estimate the true physical capabilities of your species. He looked up at Jake with an expression that was part amazement and part concern. Jake, if even a small percentage of humans possess abilities, like yours, your species could be one of the most physically powerful in the galaxy. Jake sat back down on his bed. That's exactly the problem. Do you think the Galactic Council would be comfortable with that information? HFY set down his datapad and looked directly at Jake. You're asking me to keep this secret from my own people. I'm asking you to think about what would happen if this information got out, Jake said. What would change? How would the other species react? The room fell silent again as HFY considered Jake's words. Jake could see his roommate, struggling with the decision. The alien's scientific training told him that important discoveries should be shared, but his growing understanding of the situation made him realize the potential consequences. There's something else you should know, Jake said. This isn't just about physical strength. Some humans have other abilities too. Enhanced reflexes, improved healing, better endurance. We've been careful to hide all of it. HFY's eyes grew wide again. How many humans have these abilities? I don't know exactly, Jake admitted. My family doesn't have contact with all the others, but based on what my parents have told me, there could be millions of us around the world. Millions, HFY repeated quietly. Jake could see that his roommate was starting to understand the full scope of what he had discovered. This wasn't just about one unusually strong human. This was about an entire species that had been hiding its true nature from the galaxy. Jake, this is enormous, HFY said. Your species has been maintaining this deception for years. The amount of coordination and secrecy required would be incredible. It hasn't been easy, Jake said, but it's been necessary. Look at how peaceful things are now. Humans and aliens study together, work together, explore space together. Would that be possible if the galaxy saw us as a threat? HFY stood up and began pacing around his side of the room. Jake recognized this behavior from months of living with the alien. HFY always paced when he was trying to solve a difficult problem. But the deception can't last forever, HFY said. Eventually, someone else will discover what I discovered tonight. What happens then? Jake had been thinking about this same question for years. I don't know. My parents always said that someday we might have to reveal the truth. They hoped that by the time that happened, humans would have proven themselves to be trustworthy, members of the galactic community. And have you? HFY asked, stopping his pacing to look at Jake. Have humans proven themselves trustworthy? Jake thought about this question. I think so. We've kept our word on every treaty we've signed. We've helped with scientific research and exploration missions. We've shared our own technology and knowledge freely. The only thing we've hidden is our physical capabilities. HFY nodded slowly. That's true. Human reputation in the galactic community is very good. Your species is seen as cooperative and peaceful. That's because we've worked hard to build that reputation, Jake said. We knew that if we ever had to reveal our true abilities, we would need the other species to trust us. HFY sat back down at his desk and picked up his datapad again. Jake, I need to ask you something important. Are there any humans with abilities like yours in positions of power? In your government or military? Jake hesitated before answering. This was getting into information that his family had always warned him to keep absolutely secret. But he had already told HFY so much, and he felt that his roommate deserved an honest answer. Yes, Jake said quietly. Some of the people who make decisions for humanity have these abilities. They understand what we're capable of, and they help maintain the secrecy. HFY's expression became very serious. So this isn't just a few families hiding their abilities. This goes all the way to the top of human society. Jake nodded. The people who lead humanity know the truth about what we can do. They've made the decision to keep it hidden for the good of our species and for the peace of the galaxy. HFY set down his datapad and looked at Jake for a long time. You realize that what you've told me tonight could change everything if it got out. That's why I'm trusting you to keep it secret, Jake said. You're my friend, HFY. We've lived together for months, you know me. Do you think I'm dangerous? Do you think humanity is a threat to the galaxy? HFY considered this question carefully. No, he said finally. If you were dangerous, you would have used your abilities to dominate or intimidate others. Instead, you've chosen to hide them and work alongside us as equals. Jake felt relief wash over him. That's exactly the point. We have the strength to be a threat, but we choose not to be. Doesn't that make us safer allies rather than more dangerous enemies? HFY was quiet for several more minutes, thinking through everything Jake had told him. Finally, the alien looked up and met Jake's eyes. I won't tell anyone what I saw tonight, HFY said. But Jake, you need to understand that this secret is bigger than just you and me. This affects the entire galaxy. Jake nodded. I know, and someday we'll probably have to deal with that. But for now, can we just try to keep things the way they are? HFY agreed, but Jake could see that his roommate's mind was still racing, with questions and concerns. The secret was safe for now, but Jake knew that everything had changed between them. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Jake thought that his secret was safe with HFY, but he was wrong. Despite his roommate's promise to keep quiet, word began to spread within days. Jake never found out exactly how it happened. Maybe HFY had talked to someone without meaning to reveal anything important. Maybe another alien student had overheard part of their conversation, or maybe someone had been watching Jake's workouts without him knowing. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later during lunch in the campus dining hall. Jake was sitting with his friend Alex when he noticed several alien students staring at him from across the room. They were trying to be subtle about it, but Jake could feel their eyes on him. Do you know those guys? Alex asked, following Jake's gaze. Sort of, Jake replied. They're in some of my classes. What Jake did not tell Alex was that these were the same alien students who had been asking HFY strange questions about human physical capabilities. Jake had overheard parts of these conversations, and they made him nervous. The next day, things got worse. Jake was walking to his physics class when a Therian student named Velcott approached him in the hallway. Velcott was tall and gray, with large black eyes, and he was known for being very direct in his communication. Jake Martinez, Velcott said, blocking Jake's path. I have heard interesting things about your species' physical abilities. Would you be willing to demonstrate some exercises for my research? Jake felt his heart start beating faster. I don't know what you mean, he said, trying to sound confused. My sources tell me that humans may be capable of more than our databases indicate, Velcott continued. I am conducting a study on comparative species strength, and I would very much like to include accurate human data. Jake shook his head. I think your sources are wrong. I'm just a regular student. But Velcott did not look convinced. Perhaps we could arrange a simple test, nothing too demanding. Just basic strength and endurance measurements. Jake managed to get away from Velcott without agreeing to anything, but the encounter left him worried. If alien students were starting to ask questions, it would not be long before someone in authority found out. His fears proved correct 2 days later when Jake received a message on his student account. The message was from Dean Patricia Walsh, asking him to come to her office immediately. Jake's stomach dropped as he read the short formal request. Dean Walsh's office was on the top floor of the administration building. Jake had never been there before, and he felt nervous as he took the elevator up. When he knocked on the door, a voice told him to come in. Dean Walsh was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a serious expression. She was sitting behind a large desk, but she was not alone. Standing next to her was an alien that Jake had never seen before. This alien was clearly Velcari like HFY, but much taller and more imposing. The alien wore what looked like a military uniform with symbols that Jake did not recognize. "Mr. Martinez," Dean Walsh said, "please sit down. This is Commander Veltar of the Velcari Science Division. She has some questions for you." Jake sat down in the chair across from the desk, trying to look calm even though his heart was racing. Commander Veltar studied him with large, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. "Mr. Martinez," Commander Veltar said in a voice that carried authority, "we have received reports about unusual physical demonstrations involving human students. Specifically, reports that suggest your species may have been misrepresenting your capabilities to the Galactic Council." Jake tried to keep his expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, Commander." Commander Veltar pulled out a data pad and began reading from it. 3 days ago, a reliable source reported observing a human student lifting approximately 450 kilograms with apparent ease. This same source reported observing other physical feats that should be impossible for your species. Jake's mouth went dry. Someone had given them very specific information about what HFY had seen. Either his roommate had broken his promise, or someone else had been watching that night. "Additionally," Commander Veltar continued, "we have received reports from multiple alien students suggesting that human physical capabilities may exceed documented levels. These reports have prompted an official investigation." Dean Walsh leaned forward in her chair. "Jake, if there's something we need to know about human abilities, now is the time to tell us. This situation is bigger than just you." Jake looked back and forth between the Dean and the Commander. He could see that they both believed the reports they had received. Denying everything would be pointless now. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Jake said carefully. Commander Veltar stood up from her position next to the Dean's desk. "We want you to participate in a demonstration, a series of tests that will allow us to measure your true physical capabilities. If the reports we have received are accurate, this could have significant implications for human-alien relations." Jake felt trapped. If he refused, it would only make him look more suspicious. If he agreed, he would be revealing secrets that his family had kept for generations. But looking at the serious expressions on both faces, Jake realized that he might not have a choice. "What kind of tests?" Jake asked. "Standard physical assessments," Commander Veltar replied. "Strength measurements, agility tests, endurance challenges. Nothing that would cause harm, but thorough enough to give us accurate data." Dean Walsh added, "Jake, I want you to know that the university will support you regardless of the outcome, but we need to understand what we're dealing with here." Jake thought about his parents and what they would want him to do in this situation. They had always told him to be careful, but they had also taught him to be smart about when to reveal the truth. Maybe this was one of those times. "If I agree to these tests," Jake said slowly, "what happens to the results?" Commander Veltar and Dean Walsh exchanged glances. "That would depend on what the results show," the commander said. "If human capabilities are significantly greater than documented, the Galactic Council would need to be informed." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "And then what?" "That would be up to the Council to decide," Commander Veltar said. "But I can tell you that the galaxy values honesty and cooperation. Species that have hidden important information in the past have faced consequences. The threat was subtle but clear. If humans had been lying about their abilities, there would be punishment. But if Jake continued to lie now, the consequences might be even worse. "Can I have some time to think about this?" Jake asked. Dean Walsh looked at Commander Veltar, who nodded slightly. "You have until tomorrow morning," the dean said. "But Jake, you should know that this investigation is going to continue whether you participate or not. We have other human students we can test." Jake's heart sank as he realized the full scope of what was happening. This was not just about him anymore. The authorities were planning to test multiple humans, which meant that other students with abilities like his might be forced to reveal their secrets too. As Jake left the dean's office, his mind was racing. He needed to contact his parents immediately. They would know what to do. But he also needed to warn other human students who might have abilities they were hiding. If the aliens were planning a broader investigation, everyone needed to be prepared. Jake walked across campus toward his dorm, feeling like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. The secret that his family had kept for generations was about to be exposed, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. When he reached his room, he found HFY sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. The alien looked up when Jake entered, and his expression was filled with guilt and worry. "Jake," HFY said quietly, "I am so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." Jake sat down on his bed and looked at his roommate. "What exactly did happen, Zeph?" HFY explained that he had mentioned Jake's abilities to another Velkari student, thinking he could trust them to keep the information confidential. But that student had reported it to their superiors, who had then contacted Commander Veltar. "I thought I was being careful," HFY said. "I thought if I presented it as a scientific curiosity, it would not cause problems. I was wrong." Jake felt angry for a moment, but then he realized that HFY had never asked to be put in this position. His roommate was a scientist who had discovered something amazing, and it was natural for him to want to share that discovery with others. "It's not your fault," Jake said finally. "This was always going to happen eventually. Maybe it's better that it's happening now, when we have some control over the situation." HFY looked confused. "What do you mean?" Jake stood up and walked to his window. Outside, he could see human and alien students going about their normal routines, unaware that everything was about to change. "I mean that maybe it's time for the truth to come out," Jake said. "My parents always told me that someday we would have to stop hiding. Maybe that day is tomorrow." HFY was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "What are you going to do?" Jake turned away from the window and looked at his alien roommate. "I'm going to take their tests, and I'm going to show them exactly what humans are capable of." Jake spent most of the night on the phone with his parents. The conversation was difficult and emotional. His mother cried when he told her what had happened, and his father was quiet for a long time before speaking. "We always knew this day might come," his father said finally. "We hoped it would be different, but maybe this is for the best." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "I mean that maybe it's time for humanity to stop hiding," his father replied. "We've spent so many years being careful and secretive. Maybe we're ready to be honest about who we are." His mother disagreed. "It's too soon," she said. "We don't know how the galaxy will react. This could put our entire species in danger." Jake listened to his parents debate the situation for over an hour. In the end, they left the decision up to him. "You're the one who has to take these tests," his father said. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you." The next morning, Jake met Commander Veltar and Dean Walsh at the university gymnasium. The large space had been cleared of normal equipment and filled with alien testing devices. Jake had never seen technology like this before. The machines looked advanced and precise, designed to measure things that human science could barely detect. "Are you ready, Mr. Martinez?" Commander Veltar asked. Jake nodded, though he felt nervous about what was going to happen. "What do you want me to do first?" Commander Veltar gestured toward a platform surrounded by scanning equipment. "We'll start with basic strength measurements. Please step onto the platform and lift the weights that will be provided." Jake walked to the platform and looked at the weights that had been set up for him. They started small, probably around 50 kilograms. This was the kind of weight that would challenge most humans, but would be easy for Jake. "Begin when you're ready," Commander Veltar said. Jake lifted the first weight easily. The alien scanning equipment hummed and beeped as it recorded data. Commander Veltar looked at her data pad and made notes. "Interesting," she said. "Please try the next weight." The next weight was heavier, maybe 100 kilograms. Jake lifted it just as easily as the first one. He could see surprise on the faces of the human university staff who were watching. Even Dean Walsh looked shocked. They continued adding weight. 150 kilograms, 200, 250. Jake lifted each one without any sign of effort or strain. The alien equipment continued to record everything, and Commander Veltar's expression grew more serious with each test. "This is remarkable," Commander Veltar said when Jake had lifted 300 kilograms. "According to our data, this should be impossible for a human of your size. Should I keep going?" Jake asked. Commander Veltar nodded. "Please continue until you reach your limit." Jake lifted 400 kilograms, then 450. This was the weight that HFY had seen him lift in their dorm room. But Jake was nowhere near his actual limit. He continued lifting heavier and heavier weights until he reached 600 kilograms. "That's enough for now," Commander Veltar said, though Jake could have lifted more. "Let's move on to agility testing." The agility tests were just as impressive. Jake ran faster than any human should have been able to run. He jumped higher and farther than seemed possible. His reaction times were so quick that the alien equipment had trouble measuring them accurately. "How is this possible?" Dean Walsh asked Commander Veltar during a break between tests. "I don't know," the commander replied. "This contradicts everything we know about human biology." The endurance test was the most dramatic. Jake ran on an alien treadmill for over 2 hours at a speed that would have exhausted most humans in minutes. He showed no signs of fatigue, and his heart rate stayed remarkably steady throughout the entire test. When the testing was finally over, Commander Veltar studied her datapad for a long time. Jake stood nearby, waiting to hear what she would say. Dean Walsh and the other university staff looked stunned by what they had witnessed. "Mr. Martinez," Commander Veltar said finally, "these results are extraordinary. You have demonstrated physical capabilities that exceed those of most species in the galaxy. This is not what we expected from a human." Jake took a deep breath. "There's something you need to understand, Commander. I'm not unusual for a human. There are many others like me." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Commander Veltar's large eyes grew wide, and Dean Walsh made a sound of surprise. "What exactly are you saying?" Commander Veltar asked. "I'm saying that humans have been hiding our true capabilities," Jake said. "We're not the weak species that your databases describe. We're much stronger than we've let you believe." Commander Veltar was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Jake could see her mind working as she considered the implications of what he had told her. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would your species hide such abilities?" Jake looked around the gymnasium at all the faces staring at him. Human and alien. Staff members were waiting to hear his answer. The future of human-alien relations might depend on what he said next. "Because we were afraid," Jake said honestly. "We studied the history of species that joined the Galactic Council. We saw what happened to civilizations that were seen as too strong or too dangerous. We didn't want to be viewed as a threat." Commander Veltar set down her datapad and walked closer to Jake. "So your species chose to appear weak, rather than risk being seen as aggressive." "We chose to appear average," Jake corrected. "We wanted to be accepted as peaceful members of the galactic community. We thought that if we hid our strength, we could focus on building trust and cooperation." Dean Walsh stepped forward. "Jake, are you saying that the human government knows about this?" Jake nodded. "The people who lead humanity know the truth about what we can do. They made the decision to keep it hidden for the safety of our species." The gymnasium fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Jake could see shock, confusion, and concern on the faces around him. He had just revealed one of the biggest secrets in human history. Commander Veltar picked up her datapad again and began typing rapidly. "I need to report this to the Galactic Council immediately," she said. "This changes everything we know about your species." Jake felt a moment of panic. "What will happen to us?" Commander Veltar stopped typing and looked at him. "I don't know. The Council will need to decide how to respond to this revelation. Species that have hidden important information from the galaxy have faced various consequences in the past." Over. The next few days, Jake watched as news of his demonstration spread throughout the galactic community. Emergency meetings were called on multiple worlds. Diplomatic channels buzzed with activity. For a while, it seemed like the peaceful relationship between humans and aliens might fall apart completely. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of anger or fear, many alien species began to express admiration for humanity's restraint. The fact that humans had possessed such strength but chosen not to use it impressed many galactic leaders. HFY became one of humanity's strongest supporters. He testified before the Velkari Council, arguing that humans had shown exactly the kind of wisdom that made them valuable members of the galactic community. They could have used their strength to dominate or intimidate, HFY said during his testimony. Instead, they chose cooperation and peace. This is not the behavior of a dangerous species. This is the behavior of a wise one. Other alien students who had studied alongside humans supported this view. They pointed out that humans had been helpful and cooperative throughout their time in the exchange program. Despite having hidden abilities, humans had never used them to gain unfair advantages or harm others. The Galactic Council's final decision surprised everyone. Instead of punishing humanity for their deception, they invited humans to take on new roles in galactic security and diplomacy. Human physical capabilities combined with their demonstrated wisdom and restraint made them ideal peacekeepers. Jake found himself at the center of a new type of exchange program. Humans with abilities like his were invited to train alongside alien security forces. His dorm room became a meeting place for interspecies cooperation projects, with HFY helping to bridge the gap between human and alien perspectives. Months later, as Jake and HFY worked together on a joint research project, the alien admitted something to his human roommate. "I was terrified when I first saw your true abilities," HFY said. "I thought it meant that humans were dangerous." Jake smiled as he adjusted weights that no longer needed to be hidden. "And now? Now I understand that your greatest strength isn't your physical power," HFY replied. "It's your wisdom in knowing when not to use it." Jake looked out their window at the campus below. Human and alien students still walked together between classes, but now their relationships were built on complete honesty rather than hidden truths. The revelation of human capabilities had not destroyed the peace between species. Instead, it had created a deeper understanding and stronger cooperation. The secret was finally out, and the galaxy was better for it.